Aries moves before anyone gives it permission. It doesn't wait for everything to be ready, for the moment to be perfect, or for everyone else to get on the same page. There's something in that energy that simply needs to move, to decide, to begin. And that way of showing up in the world, so direct and so alive, says a lot about what Aries actually represents in the zodiac. It's the first sign, not in terms of hierarchy, but in symbolic order. Aries opens the cycle. It represents the exact moment when something that didn't exist starts to exist. The impulse before the form. The spark before the fire. In astrological tradition, that position isn't random. Aries carries the energy of beginnings, and you can feel that in almost everything it does. Its element is fire, and its modality is cardinal. Put simply, this is a sign that initiates, that activates, that doesn't sit around waiting for things to come to it. Fire in astrology speaks to enthusiasm, to drive, to an energy that moves outward and needs to express itself. And the cardinal modality adds that capacity to start projects, make decisions, and open paths where there weren't any before. The planet that rules Aries is Mars, and that matters too. Mars isn't just the planet of war, the way it's often oversimplified. It's the planet of desire, of action, of courage, of the will to move towards something. When Mars is working well, it gives determination, the ability to fight for what you want, and the courage to face difficult situations. When it's out of balance, it can become pure reactivity, urgency without direction, an energy that collides before it listens. Understanding that helps you see Aries with a lot more depth. Because Aries isn't simply impulsive or explosive. That's the surface-level version. The real version is more interesting. This is a sign that has a very direct relationship with desire. When it wants something, it really wants it. When it decides to act, it acts. That ability to commit to a direction without getting stuck in doubt can be an enormous strength, especially in a world that so often paralyzes people with too much analysis. But it can also become a trap if it isn't accompanied by strategy, patience, or the ability to pay attention to what's happening around it. In everyday life, this shows up clearly. Someone with a lot of Aries energy might have an idea on Monday and already be putting it into motion by Wednesday. They can see opportunity where others see risk, and they'll go for it without experiencing the same kind of vertigo that other signs might feel. That speed has real value, but it can also mean that the same project, 3 weeks later, doesn't carry the same shine. The initial excitement faded, routine set in, and sustaining what was started requires a different kind of energy than what drove the beginning. That's one of the most honest challenges of Aries, learning consistency. Not as a sentence, but as a skill that gets built over time. The strength to start is innate. The discipline to continue is something that takes work. And Aries can develop it once it understands that strategy doesn't mean losing speed. It means using that speed more wisely. In relationships, Aries tends to show up with intensity. It likes clarity, direct honesty, and connection that feels genuinely alive. It doesn't have much patience for dancing around things or for situations where nobody says what they actually mean. That transparency can be incredibly refreshing. There are people who deeply value being with someone who says what they feel without games, who takes initiative, who doesn't let things stagnate. But that same energy can create friction when the other person needs more time, more emotional processing, or a different pace altogether. Aries can read a pause as disinterest, or interpret hesitation as a lack of desire, and sometimes it reacts before really understanding what's going on. Not out of any intention to hurt, but because its first move tends to be action, not waiting. In love, Aries can care deeply and with real force, It looks for a connection where there's genuine desire, where the energy feels mutual and alive. It needs to feel like there's momentum, like the relationship is going somewhere, like the other person actually wants to be there. What's harder is sustaining a relationship once the intensity of the beginning gives way to everyday life. That's where the emotional work comes in. Learning that love also gets built in the quieter moments, in small acts of consistency, in patient listening. In friendship, Aries tends to be loyal in a very straightforward way. It's not the kind of loyalty that shows up in elaborate words, but in actions. It's there when it's needed. It shows up with energy, and it pushes the people around it to go after things they've been putting off. It likes shared experiences, movement, doing. A friendship that's purely static, where you only talk but nothing ever happens, can start to feel dull. It needs something living inside the connection. At work, Aries tends to perform best when there are real challenges on the table. Unchanging routine, slow processes with no clear purpose, and overly rigid structures can wear it down. But when there's a problem to solve, a goal to reach, or something to build from scratch, a focus and an energy emerge that can genuinely surprise people. Aries leads naturally, not because it wants to be in charge, but because it has that ability to see where things need to go and start moving before anyone else has raised their hand. Its relationship with communication is also characteristic. It tends to be direct, straightforward, clear. What it thinks, it says, and that can be a genuinely valuable quality in environments where everyone is busy saying what people want to hear. But the speed at which it speaks can sometimes outpace the speed at which it listens, and that creates conflict. Not because Aries doesn't value others, but because it processes quickly, and waiting for someone else to finish working something out can feel genuinely difficult. Conflict is another area where Aries has a particular relationship. It doesn't usually avoid it. When something bothers it, it addresses it. That can be healthy. Problems don't pile up. They don't quietly rot beneath the surface. But confronting conflict immediately, in the heat of the moment, without any pause, can also make situations worse that might have looked very different with a little more time. The difference between saying what you think and reacting without a filter is something Aries usually learns over time, often after saying things that didn't actually represent what it really felt. An Aries in balance is an inspiring presence. It has the courage to start what others only imagine, the honesty to say what others stay quiet about, the enthusiasm to get things moving, and the clarity to make decisions when everyone else is paralyzed by doubt. It's the sign that reminds you that acting is also a form of trusting yourself. Under pressure, that same energy can turn impatient, reactive, or too focused on its own pace to notice anyone else's. It may push forward when the moment actually calls for stillness, or move at a speed that others simply can't match. Not out of bad intent, but because that energy hasn't yet learned to regulate its own fire. And in a way, that's the central lesson of Aries. That strength isn't only in the start. It's also in choosing when to start, in sustaining what you've begun, in listening before reacting, and in understanding that some things aren't won with more speed, but with more depth. Aries has the courage to begin. The growth is in discovering it, also has the capacity to stay.